Hello class, I am Professor Weichert and this is Budgeting and Financial Management for Nonprofits. In this class we're going to study budgets, budget formation, implementation, tracking and auditing. We will also study basic accounting so we can track expenses and use the results in financial analysis. The class will study the financing of nonprofits. For those of you interested in forming your own nonprofit, I have provided several URL links in the syllabus and course content for you. Before you watch this video, I want you to review the class PowerPoints. So if you've not yet looked at the class PowerPoints, please do so, because I will be discussing a few of the slides in this video. So let's begin. Every nonprofit in the United States is a corporation. By definition, corporations are legal entities that are separate from the owners. Corporations have boards of directors who are protected in most circumstances from personal liability of any corporate activity. Whether you are a Home Depot director or a American Red Cross director, your corporation is a separate entity from you. There are categories of nonprofits. I want you to understand the nature of nonprofits. We use the word broadly, but in this class, we're only examining one type of nonprofit, and that is a charity. Nonprofit corporations are identified by the IRS as 501(c)s, and there are at least 27 categories of 501(c)s. We are interested in the 501(c)(3)s, which are charities or private foundations. These charities can include art, culture, humanities, education, healthcare, human services, and other types of organizations. We will not study the other categories, such as 501(c)(6)s, which are for Chamber of Commerce or trade boards and business leagues, or the National Football League. What all 27 categories have in common is that their revenue is not taxable. In addition, 501(c)(3)s have another advantage the other categories do not have. Donors may take a tax deduction if they give money to a 501(c)(3). This is not the case for other 501(c)s. So if you give a donation to your local Chamber of Commerce, you cannot take a tax deduction. But if you give it to the American Red Cross as the donor, you may take a tax deduction. In this class, we're only going to discuss charities, 501(c)(3)s. So from this point on, when I use the term nonprofit, I'm only referring to charities, or 3s. If I were to refer to all nonprofits, I would call it the nonprofit sector. There are reporting requirements, few but clear. Churches of any kind do not have to report to the IRS. Nonprofits do report to the IRS annually using the Form 990, or a small Form 990-EZ. Other religious organizations have affiliated hospitals or clinics and schools. And if so, a religiously affiliated organizations must follow the IRS Public Charities rules. States also have reporting requirements. There are 50 states, hence there are 50 different state reporting requirements. Nonprofits follow the state in which they are incorporated. Under the law, states cannot interfere with citizens forming nonprofits, but states retain the right to regulate nonprofits. The size. The size of nonprofits differs dramatically. In 2015, over 1 million organizations were classified as public charities, composing about 2/3 of all registered nonprofits. Keep in mind that religious congregations and organizations with less than $5,000 in gross receipts are not required to register at the IRS. So there are more than 1 million nonprofits out there. Almost 1/3 of nonprofits have less than $100,000 in gross receipts, so many of them are very small. In terms of finances, public charities in 2018 reported almost $2 trillion in revenues and $1.8 trillion in expenses. Assets held by charities accounted for just under 2/3 of the sector's total. The types of charities are varied, with the most revenue in health and hospitals, over $2 trillion. Education comes in second with $354 billion in revenue, and higher education comes next with $231 billion. Human service charities collect $234 billion, with environmental charities coming in last with $20 billion, less than arts charities with $41 billion. The nonprofit structure. The IRS requires nonprofits to have at least 3 board members. Usually boards, depending upon its size and circumstances, run from 7 to 50 board members. Depending on size, a board will operate with several committees: executive, finance, and program. Larger ones will have a separate audit committee. Although the board has fiduciary responsibility, the board hires an executive director who runs the day-to-day operations of the nonprofit. Clearly, the ED and the board must work closely together, and often the ED's biggest problems are personality clashes among board members and often with the ED. The mission. The missions of nonprofits are at the heart of what drives nonprofits. Nonprofits are not driven by the profit motive. The directors and staff members are driven by the mission. And to be successful, we need to link the mission to the financial resources of the nonprofit. There will always be a tension between the striving to fulfill the mission and the maintenance of financial viability. Anytime there's a proposal to expand activities, there will be a tension in how to fund that activity. The same is true for times of fiscal stress. When revenues decline, EDs and directors must face how to balance the budget during hard fiscal times and still maintain the mission. Then we come to financial standards. The Securities and Exchange Commission worked to establish the Financial Accounting Standards Board, FOSBA. FOSBA sets the accounting standards for all non-governmental entities, including corporations. Although there is not much oversight of nonprofits in federal law, there are strong accounting standards that all corporations, including nonprofits, must follow. These standards allow all of us to have some confidence that when a corporation reports its finances, and those finances were audited by a certified public accountant, then the report is an accurate reflection of that corporation's finances. In this class, we'll study those accounting standards. Let's turn to budgeting. We begin the work of understanding a nonprofit's finances with budgeting. Budgeting is a plan. It's not real. It's a dream. What is spent is real. These are what we call actuals. What was actually spent is an actual. This is where accounting comes in. Accounting tracks, records, records, categorizes, and reports what actually happened. When a nonprofit creates a budget, it usually does so with the ED and the board's finance committee. Often the ED will ask for input from the staff. When we examine the finances, we do so within the nonprofit structure. Think of the structure of a nonprofit as having 4 parts: governance, management, program, and finance. Now let's talk about your homework. So for your homework this week, you will consider what actually happened to the nonprofit Higher Education Harvest, and you record those actuals for fiscal year 1998 and 1999. This requires you to carefully read the entire case and account for every dollar in revenue and expense. You must use the spreadsheet provided for you in course content. We're also going to continue with the case, Higher Education Harvest, for the second week of the class. And then in the second week, I want you to build a budget for the third year, 2000. And when you build that plan, that budget, you must first plan how you would change governance, management, and the program. For example, governance is about the board and its role. Does this nonprofit need to expand its board? And if so, what type of board member would be most useful? If the board found a new member who is good at fundraising, that might have an impact on the fiscal year 2000 budget. Another example is with management. The current ED works alone. She has no one to help her. What if you were to plan in fiscal year 2000 to hire a part-time bookkeeper and or a development officer and or an administrative assistant? How would you afford it? Similarly, in program, the nonprofit has had 2 successful years. Is this the time to expand? And if so, how? On the discussion board, every week you must post twice on the discussion board. I expect you to share your thinking. In effect, I want you to share parts of your homework. The discussion board is a place for all of us to understand the material. So I will be on this discussion board, and so will you, sharing your ideas. Thank you, and good luck in this course, and see you in cyberspace.